Some stories make us laugh, some stories inspire us, and some stories remind us where we came from. Welcome to Brick Bar's History Files. The mystery. For nearly 1,000 years, they stood beside kings, they settled disputes, guided entire tribes, presided over sacred ceremonies, and guarded knowledge passed down from one generation to the next. To some, they were priests. To others, judges, teachers, philosophers, and trusted advisors. Yet to Rome, they represented something far more dangerous, an influence that could unite entire peoples, strengthen resistance, and preserve traditions beyond the reach of an empire. The Romans feared them enough to outlaw their practices, destroy their sacred groves, and attempt to erase their influence from history. But who were the Druids, really? Were they wise spiritual leaders, keepers of ancient knowledge, masters of medicine, or practitioners of rituals that later generations would describe as magic? The truth is, they left behind no sacred scriptures written in their own hand, no detailed histories, no libraries explaining their beliefs. Almost everything we know about them comes from outsiders, Greek travelers, Roman generals, and later medieval writers, each viewing the Druids through the lens of their own culture and beliefs. That makes separating history from legend one of archaeology's greatest challenges. Who were these mysterious figures, whose names still echo through stories of enchanted forests, standing stones, and forgotten kingdoms? And why, more than 2,000 years after their disappearance, does the mystery of the Druids continue to capture our imagination? To answer those questions, we must journey back to ancient Europe, where history, myth, and mystery meet beneath the branches of the sacred oak. Where did they come from? Long before the Roman Empire dominated Europe, the Druids were already respected figures among the Celtic people. But where did they come from? The honest answer is that no one knows. Unlike the Egyptians, the Greeks, or the Romans, the Druids left behind almost no written record of their own. Instead, their story must be reconstructed through archaeology, ancient writers, and the clues left scattered across Europe. The Druids are most closely associated with the Celts, a collection of tribes who spread across much of Western Europe during the first millennium BC. Their influence stretched across Gaul, modern-day France, into Britain, and throughout Ireland. Although these tribes shared languages, art, and religious tradition, they were never a single united nation. Instead, they were many independent people connected by culture rather than one government. Among them, the Druids became some of the most respected members of society. Most of what historians know about the Druids comes from Greek and Roman writers. Julius Caesar described them as priests, judges, teachers, and advisors to kings. Other writers, including Strabo, Pliny the Elder, and Tacitus, added their own observations. But there is an important challenge. These men were outsiders. Some admired the Druids. Others viewed them as enemies of Rome. Their writings provide invaluable information, yet they were written through Roman and Greek eyes. That means historians must constantly compare ancient texts with archaeological discoveries, carefully separating observation, opinion, and political propaganda. Over the years, some writers have proposed another intriguing possibility. Could the Druids have been influenced by the Phoenicians, the great maritime traders of the ancient Mediterranean? Archaeology confirms that Phoenician merchants traded across vast distances. Their ships carried metals, pottery, glass, and luxury goods throughout the Mediterranean, and many have reached parts of the Atlantic coast. in search of valuable resources, like tin. These trading networks created opportunities for ideas, technology, and customs to travel alongside commerce. But did the Druids themselves come from the Phoenicians? At present, there is no mainstream historical or archaeological evidence supporting that conclusion. While contact between distant cultures almost certainly occurred, most historians believe the Druids developed within Celtic society itself. Trade may have connected civilizations, but connection does not necessarily mean common origin. The deeper we search, the more mysterious the Druids become. They emerged from a culture that valued memory over writing, passing knowledge from teacher to student for generations. Because of that, their true beginnings remain hidden beneath layers of time. What survives today are fragments, ancient manuscripts, stone monuments, archaeological discoveries, stories preserved by those who encounter them. Together, they reveal glimpses of one of history's most fascinating civilizations. Not every question has an answer, but every discovery brings us one step closer to understanding the remarkable people who stood beneath Europe's sacred forests and shaped the spiritual life of the Celtic world. The power of the Druids. To understand the Druids, we must first understand something surprising. They were far more than just priests. Among the Celtic people, the Druids formed one of the most respected and influential classes in society. They advised kings, oversaw religious ceremonies, settled disputes, preserved history, taught the next generation, and helped guide decisions that could determine the fate of entire tribes. Their authority came not from wealth or military power, but from knowledge. In many Celtic societies, a king might lead the warriors, but the Druids often guided the king. Ancient writers describe the Druids as judges responsible for settling disagreements between individuals, families, and even entire tribes. Rather than allowing every dispute to end in bloodshed, they acted as respected mediators. According to Julius Caesar, their judgments carried enormous weight. Ignoring a Druid's decision could result in exclusion from religious ceremonies, a punishment that ancient writers considered one of the most severe penalties a person could face. Whether every detail recorded by Roman authorities is completely accurate remains uncertain, but there is little doubt that the Druids exercised extraordinary influence within Celtic society. Perhaps the most remarkable aspect of Druid culture was education. Unlike many civilizations, the Druids rarely committed their sacred teachings to writing. Instead, knowledge was memorized. Generation after generation, student after student, vast amount of history, law, poetry, astronomy, religious tradition, and philosophy were passed from memory alone. Some ancient sources claim a Druid's education could last as long as 20 years. Whether every student trained for exactly that length of time is impossible to verify, but historians agree that becoming a Druid required years of dedicated study, discipline, and extraordinary memory. In a world before universities, they became living libraries. One belief appears again and again in ancient descriptions of the Druids: the immortality of the soul. Julius Caesar wrote that the Druids believed death was not the end, but a transition, that the soul continued after this life. Some historians believe this belief encouraged courage in battle, because death was viewed not as an ending, but as another stage of existence. Exactly how the Druids understood the afterlife remains uncertain. Without writing from the Druids themselves, many details have been lost. Yet this belief in life's continuation became one of the defining characteristics ancient writers consistently associated with them. By now, the picture becomes much clearer. The Druids were not simply religious leaders, They educated future generations, advised rulers, interpreted sacred traditions, settled disputes, united tribes through shared beliefs, and preserved the culture of the Celtic world. To the Celtic people, they were guardians of the wisdom, but to Rome, they represented something else, a powerful network of leaders whose influence stretched far beyond any single kingdom, an institution capable of inspiring unity, preserving independence, and resisting Roman control. That influence, more than anything else, may explain why Rome eventually decided the Druids had to be destroyed. And with that decision, one of history's greatest confrontations was about to begin. Did they use magic? Perhaps no question has fascinated people more than this one. Did the Druids practice magic? The answer depends largely on what we mean by the word. To the ancient Celts, the Druids were respected for their knowledge of nature. They understood the changing seasons, the movements of the stars, the healing properties of many plants, and the rhythms of the natural world. Long before modern medicine, knowledge of herbs could save lives. A skilled healer might have appeared almost miraculous to those who did not understand how these remedies worked. To some, that knowledge itself may have looked like magic. Ancient writers occasionally describe Druids as healers. While much of their medical knowledge has been lost, archaeology and later Celtic traditions suggest that plants played an important role in daily life. Herbs, roots, tree bark, and other natural remedies were used throughout the ancient world. The Druids were likely no exception. Some treatments undoubtedly reflected practical experience passed down through generations. Others may have been accompanied by prayer and ritual, or sacred ceremonies that blended physical healing with spiritual belief. To ancient people, the line between medicine and religion was often impossible to separate. Roman writers also describe the Druids practicing forms of divination. Some accounts speak of interpreting signs found in nature. Others describe ceremonies intended to seek guidance from the gods. Like many ancient cultures, the Celts believed the natural world carried meaning. The flight of birds, the changing seasons, the heavens above, and sacred rituals all formed part of a spiritual worldview. Exactly how these ceremonies were performed remains uncertain. Most descriptions come from outsiders and must be read with caution. One of the most famous Druid ceremonies comes from the Roman writer Pliny the Elder. He described Druids harvesting mistletoe from sacred oak trees using a golden sickle. According to this account, the plant was treated with great reverence and believed to possess special significance. Whether every detail of Pliny's description is completely accurate, historians cannot say. But his account has become one of the defining images associated with the Druids. The oak itself represented strength, endurance, and the sacred relationship between humanity and the natural world. For the Druids, forests were more than places to gather, they were places of worship. Ancient writers often described the Druids performing rituals that later generations would call magic. Whether these accounts describe religious ceremonies, symbolic traditions, or genuine beliefs in supernatural power depends largely on interpretation. To the Romans, many foreign religions appeared mysterious. To the Celts, these ceremonies were likely expressions of faith, community, and their understanding of the natural world. Without writings from the Druids themselves, many questions remain unanswered. What survives are fragments, observations, and traditions preserved by those who watch them from the outside. Perhaps the greatest mystery is not whether the Druids possessed magical powers, but how much of their knowledge, their beliefs, and their wisdom disappeared when their sacred groves fell silent. holly groves, and holly wood. To understand the Druids, we must leave behind temples of stone and enter the cathedral they chose instead. The forest, unlike many ancient civilizations, the Druids did not build towering pyramids or massive marble temples. According to ancient writers, many of their most sacred ceremonies took place beneath the open sky, surrounded by ancient trees. To them, forest was more than wilderness. It was a place where the natural world and the spiritual world seemed to meet. Among all trees, none held greater significance than the mighty oak. The oak symbolized strength, endurance, and stability. Its deep roots and towering branches made it a powerful image of life itself. Other trees also held importance. The evergreen, often associated with longevity and remembrance, became linked to places of burial and reflection. Holly trees, which remained green through the harvesting winter, came to symbolize resilience and renewal. While many details of Druids' beliefs have been lost, the reverence for the natural world remains one of the clearest themes preserved in history. Ancient traditions also describe ceremonial objects crafted from sacred wood. Some later legends speak of staffs, walking sticks, and ritual implement carved from careful chosen trees. Whether every story is historically accurate remains impossible to verify. Wood was one of the most important materials available to the ancient society. It built homes, weapons, tools, and objects used in ceremonies. Over time, these ritual objects became woven into folklore, eventually inspiring the magical staffs and wands found in medieval legends and fantasy literature. The line between history and legend gradually becomes blurred. One modern idea has attracted considerable attention. Could the name Hollywood be connected to the Hollywood of ancient Druids? The similarity in words has inspired many books, videos, and online discussions. Some writers have drawn symbolic comparisons between sacred forests, wooden ritual objects, and the world of movies, where stories create powerful illusions and imagined worlds. It is certainly an interesting idea to consider, but history requires evidence. At present, historians do not consider Hollywood's name to have originated from Druids' ritual, sacred groves, or magical staffs. The modern name Hollywood has its own documented history, unrelated to ancient Celtic religion. The comparison remains symbolic, not historical. Yet perhaps there is still something worth remembering. For the Druids, trees were not merely resources. They were living symbols. They represented endurance, wisdom, renewal, and humanity's connection to the natural world. Thousands of years later, we still gather beneath the ancient trees. We still tell stories. We still search forests for mystery, wonder, and meaning. Perhaps that enduring connection to nature, and more than any forgotten ritual, is the greatest legacy the sacred groves left behind. And while legends may continue to grow like branches reaching toward the sky, history reminds us to admire them, while carefully separating symbolism from evidence. Human sacrifice. Perhaps no accusation against the Druids has been more repeated more often than this one. Did they practice human sacrifice? The earliest and most detailed descriptions come from Roman writers, especially Julius Caesar, whose famous account of the Gallic Wars described the Druids performing ceremonies involving human victims. Other ancient authors, including Strabo and Diodorus Siculus, also recorded similar claims. Their writings have shaped the image of the Druids for nearly 2,000 years. But are these accounts the complete story? According to Caesar, some Druids believed that offering a human's life could restore balance with the gods during time of crisis. His descriptions included elaborate ceremonies, some involving large wicker structures, later known as the Wicker Man. These accounts have inspired countless books, films, and legends. Yet historians remind us, approach these descriptions carefully. Caesar was not simply recording history, he was also a Roman general, leading a military campaign against the Celtic people. His writings helped justify Rome's conquest of the Gaul before a Roman audience. That does not automatically make this account false, but it does mean historians consider the possibility of political bias. So, what does archaeology reveal? Over the years, archaeologists have discovered human remains at some ancient Celtic sites, showing signs of unusual deaths. Some discoveries suggest ritual activity may have taken place. Others may represent executions, warfare, or ordinary burials whose original context has been lost. Evidence exists that ritual killings occurred in parts of Iron Age Europe. The much harder question is whether Druids regularly directed those ceremonies, or whether Roman writers exaggerated isolated events into a defining characteristic of an entire culture. That question remains the subject of ongoing scholarly debate. Today, most historians take a balanced approach. Some believe certain forms of ritual human sacrifice probably occurred among at least some Celtic groups, as they did in several ancient civilizations around the world. Others argue that Roman writers may have exaggerated these practices to portray the enemies as barbaric, making Rome's conquest appear justified. Still, others suggest the truth lies somewhere in between. Perhaps isolated rituals occurred, but not nearly as often as later stories imagined. Without written records from the Druids themselves, absolute certainty remains beyond our reach. History rarely offers simple answers. The Druids have often been remembered as either wise philosophers or dark sorcerers. The reality was almost certainly more complex. Some ancient acquisitions may contain elements of truth. Others may reflect fear, misunderstanding, or political propaganda. What remains certain is that the Druids played an extraordinary role in Celtic society, and much of their story has been filtered through the words of those who conquered them. Perhaps the greatest lesson is this: when studying the ancient world, the loudest voices are not always the most impartial, and sometimes the hardest part of history is deciding which stories deserve to be believed. Merlin. No figure has become more closely associated with the Druids than Merlin, the wise old man, the mysterious prophet, the guardian of ancient knowledge. For centuries, stories have placed him deep within enchanted forests, speaking with kings and wielding powers beyond ordinary understanding. But was Merlin actually a Druid? The answer is probably not, at least not according to the historical evidence. The Merlin known throughout the world today did not appear during the age of the historical Druids. Instead, his legend emerged centuries later during the Middle Ages. Medieval writers, most famously Geoffrey of Monmouth, wove together older Welsh traditions, Celtic folklore, and Christian symbolism, and stories about legendary British kings. The result was Merlin, one of history's most enduring mythical figures. Rather than preserving a single historical person, Merlin became a character shaped by many generations of storytelling. So why do so many people imagine Merlin as a Druid? The answer lies in the similarities. Like the Druids, Merlin is portrayed as a wise counselor. He understands nature, lives close to the wilderness, possesses unusual knowledge, advises rulers, and often appears as a bridge between the human world and something greater. These shared characteristics helped merge the image of the ancient Druid with the legendary wizard in the popular imagination. Over time, the two became almost inseparable. What about King Arthur? Did Merlin truly guide Britain's greatest king? That question is just as difficult. Many historians believe that if a historical Arthur existed, he likely lived during the late 5th or early 6th century, long after Roman rule in Britain had begun to collapse. The earliest Arthurian traditions contain no detailed account of the Merlin familiar today. That version of Merlin developed later, as medieval authors expanded the legends into stories we know today. At present, there is no historical evidence that Merlin was a real Druid, or that he served as advisor to a historical King Arthur. The famous partnership belongs to the world of medieval legend, not documented history. Yet perhaps that is why Merlin continues to fascinate us. He represents something far older than a single historical figure. He embodies the image of the wise teacher, the guardian of forgotten knowledge, the protector of nature, and the mysterious advisor whose wisdom shapes the destiny of kings. Whether inspired by ancient Celtic traditions, Welsh legends, Christian storytelling, or the fading memory of the Druids themselves, Merlin became a symbol that outlived them all. History cannot confirm that Merlin ever walked beneath the sacred oaks, but legend ensured that the spirit of the ancient forest would never be forgotten. The Romans declare war. As Rome expanded across Europe, it encountered an obstacle unlike any it had faced before: the Druids. To Julius Caesar, they were far more than religious leaders. They advised kings, united tribes, settled disputes, and preserved Celtic traditions. They inspired loyalty that reached far beyond individual kingdoms. Caesar understood that conquering the Celtic people meant more than defeating their warriors, and meant weakening the institution that held their society together. His writings describe the Druids as one of the most influential forces in Gaul, making them impossible for Rome to ignore. Even after Caesar's campaigns, the Druids continued to survive. Their influence remained especially strong in Britain, and on the island known to the Romans as Mona, today called Anglesey. Ancient writers describe Mona as one of the principal centers of Druidic learning and religious life. If Rome wanted complete control over Britain, many believed this island had to fall. It would become the stage for one of the most dramatic confrontations in Druid history. In AD 60, the Roman governor Suetonius Paulinus launched a military campaign against Mona. The Roman historian Tacitus describes a remarkable scene. As Roman soldiers advanced, they were met by Celtic warriors, while Druids stood among them, raising their hands, offering prayers, and calling upon their gods. Tacitus wrote that the strange sight briefly stunned the Roman soldiers, but only for a moment. The attack continued. Rome's disciplined legions pressed forward, overwhelming the defenders. After securing the island, Roman sources report that sacred groves were destroyed, ceremonial sites were dismantled, religious centers were suppressed. To Rome, these groves represented more than forests. They were gathering places where spiritual authority, education, law, and Celtic identity came together. By dismantling these sacred places, Rome hoped to weaken the influence of the Druids. How extensive this destruction was remains debated. Archaeology continues to uncover evidence across Britain and Gaul, but the written accounts come primarily from Roman authors. Even so, most historians agree that Roman rule dramatically reduced the public role of the Druids. The Roman conquest did more than redraw political borders. It transformed cultures. Ancient beliefs gave way to new systems of government, new religions, and new ways of life. The Druids were not erased overnight, but their influence steadily declined as Roman rule spread across the Celtic world. What had once been one of Europe's most respected institutions slowly faded into memory, leaving behind only sacred traditions, ancient stories, and the silent oak groves where their voices once echoed. The battle for Britain was not only fought with swords, it was also a struggle over culture, belief, and the future of an entire civilization. The fall of the Druids. The fall of the Druids did not happen in a single battle. It was not one event or one decree. Instead, it unfolded gradually over generations. As Roman rule expanded across Gaul and Britain, the influence of the Druids slowly began to weaken. The sacred groves where they gathered became fewer. Their schools became harder to maintain, and the political world they had once guided was changing. For centuries, they had stood beside kings. Now, many of those kingdoms no longer existed. Roman government brought new laws, new cities, new customs, and new systems of authority. The Druids had once acted as judges, teachers, religious leaders, and adversaries. Many of those responsibilities were gradually assumed by Roman officials and institutions. As each generation passed, the role the Druids had filled for centuries became smaller. The world they had known was changing, and with it, their place within the society. Other transformations soon followed. Christianity gradually spread throughout the Celtic lands. Churches were established. Monasteries became new centers of learning. Many ancient religious traditions slowly gave way to Christian belief. This transition did not happen overnight. For generations, old customs and new faith often existed side by side. Some traditions disappeared, others adapted. Still others survived in ways their original followers might not ever have imagined. History is rarely a story of one culture instantly replacing another. More often, it is a gradual process of change. Perhaps the greatest loss was not the sacred groves or the ceremonies, it was memory. The Druids preserved their knowledge through spoken tradition. History, law, poetry, religion, and philosophy were carried in the minds of teachers, not preserved in great libraries. As fewer students completed the long years of training, that knowledge became increasingly difficult to preserve. When an oral tradition disappears, entire worlds can vanish with it. Stories, beliefs, and generations of wisdom can be lost forever. By the early Middle Ages, the Druids had largely disappeared from history as an organized institution. The great teachers, judges, and adversaries who had once guided Celtic society were no longer part of daily life. Yet they were never completely forgotten. Their memory survived in stories, poetry, folklore, and the imagination of later generations. The sacred groves grew quiet. The voices of the Druids faded, but the mystery they left behind would prove far more difficult to erase, because sometimes an idea can outlive an empire, and sometimes the greatest legacy a civilization leaves behind is not written in stone, but remembered in stories. Did they really disappear? Did the Druids truly disappear, or did pieces of their world survive, hidden within later traditions? Many historians believe that although the Druid institution faded, some elements of Celtic culture continued to live on. After Christianity spread across Ireland, monks began preserving many of the island's oldest stories. Without their work, much of early Celtic mythology might have vanished forever. While these manuscripts were written from a Christian perspective, they often preserved echoes of a much older world. Across Wales, poets and bards continue to celebrate heroes, genealogies, and ancient legends. These traditions changed over time, but they helped preserve fragments of Celtic history and imagination. Folklore carried stories from one generation to the next. Some tales spoke of enchanted forests, wise elders, and mysterious figures who seemed to remember an older age. Whether these stories reflected distant memories of the Druids or simply the universal power of folklore remains an open question. History is rarely a clean ending. Ideas evolve, traditions adapt, cultures borrow from one another. The ancient Druids may have disappeared as an organized class, but the love of nature, the reverence for storytelling, and the wisdom carried through generations continued in new forms, not as direct descendants, but as traditions shaped by centuries of change. Sometimes, the spirit of a culture survives, even after its institutions are gone. Today, there are organizations around the world that identify as Druids. These communities often celebrate nature, seasonal festivals, poetry, and Celtic heritage. Most historians, however, do not consider these groups to be direct institutional continuations of the ancient Druids. Instead, they are generally viewed as revival movements, many of which began during the 18th and 19th centuries, drawing inspiration from ancient Celtic traditions while developing practices suited to their own time. Their connections is one of inspiration rather than an unbroken historical lineage. Perhaps that is why the Druids continue to fascinate us. They left behind no books of their own, no temples filled with inscriptions, no written explanations of what they truly believed. Instead, they left questions carried through Roman histories, medieval legends, Irish manuscripts, Welsh poetry, and centuries of folklore. The ancient Druids may be gone, but their mystery still walks beneath the old oak trees, still whispers through forgotten stories, and still reminds us that history is not only about the answers we find, but also about the questions that refuse to disappear. And perhaps that is the greatest legacy the Druids ever left behind. Legacy. More than 2,000 years have passed, and yet the Druids still refuse to disappear. Their names echo through history books, novels, films, and legends. Why? Why does a civilization that left behind almost no written records still capture our imagination? Perhaps because mystery has a power that certainty never will. The Druids have become fixtures of fantasy, from novels to films to video games. Their image appears again and again. The wise forest sage, the guardian of ancient knowledge, the keeper of forgotten secrets. These stories are not historical reconstructions. They are modern imagination inspired by fragments of the ancient world. Yet every legend contains a reminder that real history often inspires the greatest stories. Even today, the search continues. Archaeologists continue to uncover ancient settlements. Historians continue to translate forgotten manuscripts. Researchers continue asking new questions about Celtic society. Each discovery adds another small piece to a puzzle that may never be completely solved. That uncertainty is not a weakness. It is what makes history exciting. Every generation has another opportunity to ask the questions once again. Perhaps that is why people still search for the Druids, not because they expect to find hidden magic or forgotten spells, but because the Druids remind us of something deeply human, our desire to understand nature, our search for wisdom, our fascination with unknown, and our hope that somewhere beneath the oldest trees, history still has another story waiting to be told. The Druids left behind no library of their own, no written philosophy, no single voice explaining who they truly were. Instead, they left a legacy shaped by memory, by stories, by Roman accounts, by archaeology, and by centuries of imagination. Some questions may never be answered. And perhaps that is exactly why the Druids endure. Not as symbols of magic, but as symbols of humanity's endless curiosity. Because history is not only about what we know, it is also about what we continue to seek. The Druids left behind no great libraries like Alexandria, no towering monuments like Rome, and no sacred scriptures like many of the world's ancient religions. More than 2,000 years later, their voices are gone, their classrooms have vanished, their sacred groves have fallen silent, yet their story continues to inspire historians, archaeologists, writers, and dreamers around the world. Because sometimes history leaves us facts, legends preserve memories, and mystery inspires us to keep searching. Perhaps the greatest legacy of the Druids was never the answer they gave, but the questions they left behind. This has been Brick Bar's History Files. Until next time, keep questioning, keep discovering, and keep searching for the story beneath the story.